Hey there, big cats and kittens. This is the Q Code podcast coming at ya from quarantine, except for me, who's in this lovely tropical island. So if you're following us on YouTube, you can see that.
How's the temperature there, Trap?
Oh, it's a lovely 82 degrees consistently.
That is amazing.
Funny, because in your glasses, I can see like the inside of a house.
Just kidding. This is my lovely background. This is where I want to be. I want to be away from all this stuff. Not saying that if you're on an island that coronavirus is not present, but probably, I mean, if you're going to get coronavirus, might as well be on a tropical island, right? So, but
my wife did look up today that it looks like there were 0 cases in some part of Samoa, some island in Samoa.
Really?
So she said we're going to be moving there. So maybe next episode I will actually have trans background, but it won't be a background.
It'll be real.
Again, for those of you who are listening on the podcast audio form only, you can also see what we're talking about on YouTube if you visit our channel. What's our channel, Trav?
Q Code Podcast.
On YouTube?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it's just Q Code Podcast.
Sweet.
So there. Go to YouTube, check us out, so you can see what our lovely backgrounds are, except for Alan, who actually, before we started, had a background of the Tiger King, but has decided not to do that, so it kind of made my joke stupid.
Oh, fine.
Yeah. It did hurt your joke. The equity of your joke plummeted when he took that.
There he is. There's the Tiger King. So
we get a little roar, Alan.
He just got.
You guys might have met my wife there, just barely.
The thing is that like
I'm working on my roar.
Is she wearing red?
She's wearing pink.
Oh, okay, because she comes in like most of her just disappears.
Oh, my
It's a floating head.
It is like pink and black. But anyway,
cool.
Probably pretty boring for most people who are just listening, especially just to the audio.
So we've got a good show. If you listen to our last episode, we talked kind of about just our feelings about Corona, COVID-19. And so we thought we'd follow that up with a little bit more of a factual, little more of a historical episode, just to talk about kind of some of the other viruses that have gone on, some of the other plagues or outbreaks, pandemics, whatever you want to call it, that have gone around, and just to kind of see as we compare what we're going through right now, you know, I don't know which is better, or if that's really what we're going at, or just how different it is for us.
Probably just like comparing pandemics of the past with pandemics of today, and potentially pandemics of the future.
Yeah. So, but before we get into all that, I do have something that I would like to share. Now, if you followed our podcast from the beginning, we usually like to kind of start things out with just some type of a topic to get the juices flowing, to make it easier for us to just kind of go into our conversation. So we have one of those, which is a question of what is the sickest you've ever been?
Yeah, the sickest you've ever been in your life. We're
going to talk about that. Hopefully we all have. I know I have like several, but before.
So you're saying you have multiple times that you were so sick that they all tie for the most sick?
There's just 2 that come up, and they're both short, but anyway. But before we get to that, I had a conversation with my younger brother, Trevor, and he sent me these texts, and we also had on one of the episodes we had Travis Mydell, one of our friends on, and he was also in on this this conversation through text that I was having with my brother. So
like a group text.
It was a group text, but it concerns you, Danny. So figured I'd bring it up and see.
Wait, I think, is this the conversation you guys had about whether I was better looking now or better looking yesterday, or I'll be better looking tomorrow?
We would never have that conversation.
That's true, because there is no right answer. They're all tied.
Nah.
That's an answer.
That's going in as a Danny joke later. So. All right, so here we go. I get this text, and it says, "Random thought here. I just remembered that Danny made me a godfather to his son, Kai." And then he said, "I honestly don't know how to spell it. I'm the worst godfather." He's like,
wait, you couldn't spell Kai?
Yeah, he didn't know how to spell it. I think he spelled it right. Wait, where'd it go? How do you spell it?
K-A-I?
K-A-I. No, so he did not spell it right. He spelled it K-I-E. Yeah, no.
K-I-E?
K-I-E. Anyway, so he says, "Anyways, do you think he just did that so I wouldn't feel left out? I think he did. Like, let's be serious and let's think this over. The only reason I can think Danny would feel any obligation to include me is he slept on my couch for 6 months." and I was totally chill about it. We never even hung out once, Travis. If you want some solid material, you should bring that up on your next podcast episode. So then I replied, "Oh, hell yeah, definitely will. We'll get to the bottom of this semi-publicly." So, semi-publicly. Next text comes in, and this is from Travis Mydell. And he says, "Ha ha ha. I think that's a valid thought process there. That's a pretty extreme version of someone not wanting you to feel left out. Usually it's when you are having a party, not making someone a godparent." So then he says, then Trevor says, "I can remember the moment so vividly. We were standing outside the spaghetti factory, and he was going to tell you guys that he was going to have a kid. And I remember he tells both of you that you're going to be godfathers. And I swear to the man upstairs, he pans around to me and goes, 'You too, Trev.' I really feel as though he was like Oprah, and we were all the audience, because he was just giving out godfather titles to everyone. But by the time it got to me, it felt a little forced." And then the last one, Travis Mydell pipes in, and he's like, "You too, Trev, and you there, sir, cleaning the garbage cans. You're a godfather too. And that homeless gentleman, he is too. We all are." So I guess Trevor just really wants to know, did you feel that he needed to be included?
So, I mean, I figured that any kid would be happy to have one good role model in their life. Why not have as many as possible? And so
You don't have to be a godfather to be a role model.
I just think it's funny that he's like, he asked me to be his godfather to his son Kai. I honestly don't even know how to spell it. I'm the worst godfather.
I do like his thinking on that. He's like, what other words did I know that rhyme with Kai? Well, I enjoy pie, so I'm pretty sure it's just pie with a K.
Anyway.
And to clarify, I'm pretty sure that I did not say you guys are all godfathers. I said you guys are all about to become uncles.
I think that might be it. Because I actually do. I do remember it because we're standing there in that circle. And you're like, in this circle, there are 4 uncles.
It was a big time in my life.
Yeah, it was. So, all right. Well, let's move on to the next part. So the question is, when have you been the sickest, I guess, in your life? What
is the sickest you've ever been in your life?
What's the sickest you've ever been in your life? So who wants to go first?
What's the sickest you've ever been, Al?
I don't know if this was the sickest I've ever been. I'm having a hard time thinking of the sickest, but this was definitely one of the worst. And partly because it was so weird. Actually, there's 2 of them I have like this. So the first was when we were in Boy Scouts and we went on a camping trip. And like I ate a whole huge bag of beef jerky just to myself, like in an hour or 2. And it dehydrated me so bad, I just started puking my guts out. My whole body just felt weird. And I was incapacitated for the rest of the night, basically.
I feel like
Why did you not drink any water?
Huh?
Why did you not drink any water?
I wasn't aware at the time it was probably dehydration. It was only later I figured that out.
Like, I'm so thirsty. Get me another beef jerky stick.
But the other one is similar, and Danny was the cause of it. So I loved pickles as a kid. I was obsessed with pickles. And we had like this huge Costco jar of pickles. And
that is incorrect. You're already telling the story wrong.
Now I remember it.
No, it was not a Costco jar of pickles. It was a Price Savers jar of pickles. That's how old we are.
It's still big old jar of pickles.
Still around? Are they still around?
Price Savers is Sam's Club. They got bought out by Walmart, and then they became Sam's Club.
Oh. But so we had all the pickles were gone, and then Dan decided he was gonna pay me $10 or something like that if I could drink all the pickle juice in the jar. We're talking like it was like a gallon-sized jar, I swear, something like that. But so I started drinking. I was like,
gallon.
What?
Here's a gallon of pickles. You ever hear that? It's like, hey, hon,
I like them.
Now can you pick up a gallon of pickles?
I only eat pickles by the gallon.
That's what I literally did. But so I start drinking, and I'm like, this is easy. I love pickles. And I get down to like maybe a few swallows left, and then I'm just. And then Danny did not pay me.
Well, the deal was you would get $10.
You know what that amount of pickle juice does to your body?
It brines it.
So both the pickles and the beef jerky, it was years until I could eat them again. Actually, beef jerky, I still don't eat. Pickles, I do. It was a glorious day when I finally could down a pickle again and not throw up.
Well, I don't know if this will make you feel any better, but even if you would have done it, he wasn't going to pay you anyway.
No, that's exactly
he
what
would have got paid. It's just that I knew the capacity that he could handle, and I knew it was for like 0.4 ounces too much. And he was not gonna
Okay.
make it.
So, Danny, like, how old were you at the time? Like 9?
Yeah, did you even have $10?
So, like, I can see Danny was like,
because I was like 10.
Okay, Alan's body can only take this many ounces of pickle juice. I know that he's going to be able to get down to the last 4 ounces, and he will not be able to withstand it.
Why even?
friggin' nerd.
I did. I was like, I'm gonna calculate the body mass index of my brother Alan and figure out.
He's got his graphing calculator, and he's like, oh. The
As you can see, with a 0.5%
taking
confidence
4 ounces.
ratio, I can pretty much ascertain that he will not be able to finish this pickle juice.
You turn from nerd to like, you're just like pickle jizz. You went from nerd to feminine. All right, so okay, Dan, what about you?
So the sickest that I can remember being is I was 19, I believe. This is actually shortly after, if I remember right, shortly after I left Trav's couch and moved on to my mom's small apartment. And I got super sick with the flu. And I think for some reason I ended up at my grandparents' house. I think they might have gone out of town or something like that. So I was by myself, just kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker to the point where I was like starting to feel like I was getting delirious. So I go get myself to the emergency room and they're like, yeah, we got to get your fever down because it's getting dangerously high. And so they worked on that. And at the same time, they're like, we're going to have to do a spinal tap.
I remember this.
What?
Yeah. And so I'm sitting there feeling so much, like all my body aches, my joints hurt, I like got a fever. I'm just like, I have no energy. Doctor comes in with this big old needle. It's like, I gotta do a spinal tap. Unfortunately, this doctor was not very good or was new or something. And he could not find how to get in between my vertebrae. And so he was like wiggling the freaking needle.
Did you just
in my
feel it
back.
scratching on your spine?
Yeah. And I remember just sitting there holding on to the little, like the tray that you see in movies where they put like the different like tools when they're doing surgery where they're like scalpel, you know? But I'm like literally holding on to that, like leaned over, bent, hunched over as he's doing it. And then I'm like shaking and I'm like, shh, shh. And the whole thing just keeps rattling and louder as I sit there. And finally, on the third time, he's able to finally get the sample that he needs out of my spine. And then I think at that point, my dad showed up and they had given me a bunch of Benadryl and they hooked me up to a EKG that does your heart. And so I can hear the boop, boop, boop. And I'm like kind of half asleep. Apparently the thing they put on your finger that is monitoring your heartbeat fell off my finger, but I didn't notice. So all of a sudden I hear
You're like, is this happened?
and then I just I guess my dad's like, I guess I like just sat up and I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm dying! My heart stopped!
Dude, you would have already been dead. You would have been dying.
And they're like, no, it just fell off your finger. I'm like, oh. That's the sickest I can remember being. It took me like a week and a half, 2 weeks to get better from that. Like I was on codeine and some other narcotic. I'm trying to remember what it was.
All the good stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Guys, my shoulders keep disappearing.
So, I don't know if I've ever gotten that sick.
Wait, I don't know if you guys know this, but you cannot remove a bullet from somebody's body unless you have a glass or a metal cup to drop it into and make a clanging sound. Did you know that?
More vital information for your everyday life.
No, I didn't know that.
Based on every movie, if they remove a bullet from a body, you have to have something to drop it into that makes a clanging sound.
I would use a Dixie paper cup.
That would not be satisfying.
I hope they come out with a movie that they just drop bullets constantly into like rubber. I was gonna say mollusks, but that's not a type of cup.
Onto memory foam.
Yeah, rubber cups with memory foam inlay.
Basically,
I don't know where we're going with this.
basically,
I don't know either.
just to
I'm
Alex
gonna tell you
brought up
about
the
what I
weirdest
got.
thing.
container some elementary kid made to drop an egg off a roof and it won't break.
Oh, okay.
So it's got like a little parachute on it.
Was that a weird tangent?
that was a
Did I squirrel
crazy
pretty hard
dig.
there?
Yeah. So most recently this year, okay, starting like it was like January 1st. I remember because I was at my mom's. She retired this year, and I went to her retirement party.
Congrats.
What?
So congrats to your mom.
Yes. Congrats to my mom. She's living the life. But we went. She was having a retirement party at this. It was like that Club 50 something on 90th. What is
Club
that?
90.
Club 90. That's what it is.
Club 50 something on 90th.
But so we're there and like everybody was dancing, and I don't do like a lot of dancing myself, especially in clubs. We've talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but one day we will, about why I don't like clubs, and it's all Danny's fault.
Whatever. Clubs are cool. If you went with me.
But I just wasn't feeling good, and everybody's like, well, "Why aren't you dancing?" I'm like, "I feel like I'm gonna pass out." And I think then, like looking back on it, I probably had the flu. And but after a couple of days, I didn't even check to see if I had a fever. Also, didn't even know like coronavirus is going to be such a big thing. So had I known, like, did I ever come in contact with somebody from Asia? I don't know. But
Yeah. Your friends are
this
Asian.
sickness spanned 3 months. It wasn't until the beginning of March when all this craziness started that I felt good. And it was like I had a flu that was, in addition to that, after the flu, I got a sinus infection. And after that, I just got your standard cold. And throughout the whole time, for 3 months, I had a cough. And it was driving me crazy. So that's like one of the sickest, I guess, if you're looking at time frames. But as far as like feeling sick, I got food poisoning while I was on my mission. And
Wait, where'd you go on your mission again?
New Jersey.
Spanish speaking.
Spanish speaking New Jersey. But I remember because me and my companion, we went to go visit one of the members of the church, and we went in and he made us food. He was from the Dominican, and he gave us a bowl of rice that was drenched in basically like tomato sauce, like a tomato paste sauce, and then he just threw chicken in it. And
it's like spaghetti rice.
yeah, it was basically like SpaghettiOs, but with rice instead of noodles, and then just
chunks of chicken.
Chunks of what I figured out was uncooked chicken, or not very well cooked chicken. Because both me and my companion that night were uber sick, and we were floored. Like I remember, so he got it worse than I did. I don't know, maybe he had like a second bowl.
Are you guys fighting over the toilet?
No, because so I was asleep and I was feeling all right for a little bit. But I woke up to him on the toilet and he was just going from both ends. So you'd hear him do one, you'd hear him do the number two, and then he'd like pause, and he'd have to, you'd hear a pause, and then you'd hear him flip and then throw up. So, but what was funny too is, and this is me laugh, like I'm sick as a freaking dog. I'm not feeling that great. And I'm busting a gut just laying in my bed because I can hear him in there. And he'd be like, like puking. And then after every time he'd puke, he'd go, oh boy. So for like 20 minutes, I'd hear, oh boy.
So wait, what do you guys do when you guys get sick like that on your mission? Like, can you guys not go out for a day or two?
Well, I mean, it's up to us. Nobody's like monitoring us. But as I recall, we didn't, the day after was our P day, our preparation day. So we didn't have to go out and do any work until 6 p.m. that night anyway. And so we were just laying on the floor all day long. Just, I think some people brought us over like some Sprite and soda crackers and all that stuff. And by the time it got to 6 o'clock, we had like an English class that we were teaching.
Yeah.
And so we picked ourselves up and we at least went out and did the English class and then came back. And by the next day we were all good because it was all out of our system.
You got it out. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that was like the worst I remember feeling because that was yuck. But then here's the thing though. Here's the kicker. And then we can move on after this. We went back to visit him the next week because we had a meeting with him and he gave us the same damn stuff.
Did you eat it?
Yeah, we ate it. You know what
That's on you. Why'd you eat it?
Hey,
because
fool me once, shame on you.
Fool me twice.
Fool me, you can't get fooled again.
Oh man, can't get food again. No, luckily we didn't get food poisoning again. But I mean, you know, like after you get food poisoning or you get sick after eating something, the last thing you want to do. I mean, didn't you just talk about not eating pickles and freaking beef?
Yeah. And that lasted
Imagine-
years. I could not
Imagine going back just a few days later and having to eat all that again.
Well, it's like in high school. Remember, like when Carl's Jr. came out with that sourdough burger?
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, I like sourdough and I like burgers. I might as well try a sourdough burger." And then the next 2 days, I just spent throwing up. But I was like, "No, it wasn't that." So I went back the next week, got another sourdough burger. Spent the next 2 days throwing up. I didn't eat Carl's Jr. for like 15 years. Like I just barely went to Carl's Jr. like a year ago for the first time. So maybe it's like 20 years almost.
Yeah,
Carl's Jr.
you old as dirt, bro. So
What they really mean when they say if it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face, is your projectile vomit.
if you are not projectile vomiting after eating our food, we haven't done our job.
They just messed it up. If it doesn't go all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face. It should say, if it doesn't go all over the place, it doesn't come out of your face. Carl's Jr.
Just kidding. All right, we better get moving on. So let's get to our main topic.
Oh, I totally
so like
forgot we were going to
today's-
talk about other stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about whatever. I mean, I don't care. But you guys did prepare something a little bit for coronavirus, so we probably should talk about it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, the main topic today is the history of pandemics and why this time will be better. Ooh, I like that.
I know, because
Gives us a
we
little
wanted to like, last week we talked about this. We're talking about it again this week. Obviously, it's a big subject. It's a big conversation, and it's like on the top of everybody's mind and has been for the past month and probably will be for the next little while. So it's not a surprise that we're doing 2 episodes on this. After this, Trav and I have already talked, but we're going to probably go to other subjects that are not coronavirus related for a while at least, unless something else big occurs or happens in the world of COVID-19. But for now, we're going to kind of go through, like Trav said, some of the pandemics in history, what is the differences between those pandemics and what we're currently experiencing, and then try to be on a positive note and talk about things that are maybe positives or things that are better now than they would have been in pandemics of the past that we could have learned from. So hope that works for you guys. What do you think, Trav?
Works for me.
Alan, how do you feel about this? For audio people, he's doing thumbs up.
My thumbs are like weird. Look at that.
I really do think sometimes we're like forgetting that people are listening to this more than they're probably watching it.
I think
And
my
so-
thumbs will join it for the listeners, and they can bend like.
I mean,
degrees.
listen to it on the podcast, but it's so much better if you go to YouTube.
Our YouTube channel needs more hits.
Go and hit that subscribe button and hit the bell.
Yeah.
So
what does the
when we
bell
do
do?
that.
do that now. But
Because what
before, while you do that, so if we're gonna, are we ready to just get into this, guys?
Jump right in.
All right. So have you guys? Let's start back. Actually, bring up slide number 1. I'm gonna take you guys on a little journey, if you will. Back many, many years. How many years, you might ask? About 300.
The Ice Age.
No, about 3000 BC, which is about 5,000 years ago. More than that, circa 3000 BC. It was called the prehistoric epidemic that occurred, and it wiped out an entire Chinese village. That's about all I got on that one.
What's the pandemic? Just that there were some big old
I
elephants?
guess I just picked that picture because it looked prehistoric.
Oh, okay.
It's called
I thought
prehistoric epidemic.
I thought those were the Chinese people.
No, I just wanted to throw that in there to see what you guys do. All
Okay.
right, let's really start at something a little bit more modern. By modern, I mean like 1346 to 1353. Bring up slide number 2. Most of you guys have probably heard of this. Trav, what happened in 1346 to 1353?
The plague?
The Black Death.
What
The Black
color was
Plague?
the
The
plague?
Black Death?
Yep, bubonic,
The bubonic?
plague, Black Death. Yep, they're all the same.
Those are the
thing.
same
Well,
thing.
basically, like technically during the Black Death era, there was like 3 different plagues that were really going on, but the most predominant one was the bubonic plague. But yeah, it's like this is a plague that wiped through Europe, and basically their estimates are killed 30 to 60% of the population in Europe. They figured that the population of Earth was about 475 million when this started and was dropped down to about 350 million. So just imagine basically like 1 out of 4 people in the world died from this
It was
plague.
like
So
the snap.
yeah, but not quite as bad as the snap, I guess, because that was 50% of people
Well,
in the universe.
In Europe,
Now,
it was because
don't minimize the snap.
I read in Europe, 50% of the population.
Yeah,
perished.
just Europe though, not the universe. The snapping was much worse. But no, yeah, like exactly. But yeah, I mean, just imagine like literally there's 3 of us on this podcast. There's a very, very high likelihood that one of us would have died in this pandemic.
But all 3 of us could skate by free and clear.
Yeah, and then that means some other poor sap is dead.
You know who it would be.
member.
You know who it would be if it was us 3. It would be me. Because
Yeah.
I'm just that lucky. Move on.
We're gonna get into this in another episode, but I want to talk about being unlucky and just food for thought for Trav. Just remember the red light curse.
The red light curse.
We'll talk about it later. All right, so if you had the bubonic plague, basically the things that you would notice is typically aching joints, fever, vomiting of blood. You could develop tumors. So really, it kind of sounds like just like a super bad flu that turns into like vomiting blood. What would you call that?
I don't know. I want to know how they came up with bubonic anyway. Like, who came up with that?
Bubonic.
It's scary. They're like, boo, bonic.
I just wanted to see how you would come up with it. Boo, bonic.
But no, so you get the flu-like symptoms, and then you just start vomiting blood, is what you said?
Yeah, it's like basically, yeah.
Is it like?
And then some people would develop tumors. So I'm guessing there's like obviously like some people, you know, survived, but some of them could have survived, but with like these additional tumors that they developed or long-term issues from having the plague itself.
I know how they did it. I know how they did it. So somebody grew like another lump like on their chest, and someone was like, "Oh, look, you got another boob on it." And he's like, "A boob on it?" That's what we call it. It's a bubonic plague.
You got another boob on it.
Yeah.
Well done. That is a little better than my scary
Boo.
story. Bubonic. But the crazy thing about this about the Black Plague, as bad as it was during that whole time frame, think about going through that, but it kept reappearing every few years for the next 3 centuries. There would be outbreaks. And so just imagine just 300 years of like never feeling safe that like any moment now the Black Plague could come back and get you. So like the Black Plague could have very well killed somebody's like great-great-great-grandfather and their great-great-grandfather and their great-grandfather and their grandfather and their father and then.
Well, you know, maybe if they weren't all just taking dumps in the street.
Well, you live and learn, Trev. You live and learn.
And that is why we have the sewer systems that we do.
But
Speaking of
the COVID-19, even if it disappears here in the Northern Hemisphere during the summer months, it could still just go down to the Southern Hemisphere and start epidemics down there, breakouts, and then next year when it gets cold here, it'll just come back if we don't, until we actually get a vaccine that we can start giving everybody.
Yeah. No, I mean, it'll be something that we can't be like feel safe from until we do have a vaccine and we get most of the world immune to the COVID. But think about it from the standpoint of like how scary that could be for a year or two versus like your whole life.
300 years.
For a lot of people, like, because what was the average lifespan back then is probably like 35, 40 years old. So think of how many generations live their entire life in fear of bubonic plague.
That would suck.
About 9 or 10.
Well, each generation they're probably having kids at about 15 to 18.
Oh,
usually.
yeah.
So I would say
20.
Probably. Okay. So do you guys have anything else on the bubonic plague, or should we move on to smallpox?
Move on to smallpox. Woo!
All right, let's move to the next slide. So
That's what smallpox looks like?
Yeah, for anybody who's watching it on YouTube, this is what smallpox looks like when you get it. It's a terrible disease, first of all. Basically, what happens when you get smallpox is it starts with what they call raised papules, and they become filled with fluid. And then the fluid, after a couple of days, causes those papules to turn into pustulates. And then eventually the pustulates begin to leak slowly until they're drained. And then the pustulates themselves dry out. And then they become hard and scaly. And then they become lesions and then scabs all over your body, if you're lucky enough to live through all of that. So basically you have sores all over your entire body. And then most people never were the same afterwards, obviously. Like they would have all kinds of scars all over them from from having smallpox. But yeah, but it was a deadly disease. They figure on average they could have had as high of a 62%, or as high as a 62% death rate from smallpox. Part of that is because the big, huge epidemic of smallpox came from Europe. Europe.
Came from Europe.
Not my up, it's your
It's
up.
Europe.
It's a hard continent to say. All right, so it came from Europe.
Are you sure it didn't come from Japan?
Yeah, but it did come to America. But yeah, it was back in the days of Columbus and the explorers from Europe bringing this over. But basically, Europeans at this point had already become virtually immune to this kind of stuff. But they brought over these new diseases that the Native Americans here were not used to at all, and it decimated them. So over the next 100 years or so, I think it was 90% of the Native American population in the Americas, not even just North America, but in Central and Southern America, died. Not from either smallpox, other diseases that they brought, or just from being killed by the Spanish conquistadors or whoever else came over here from Europe and basically claimed the land as their own and murdered everybody that was in their way.
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
So yeah, that's smallpox.
So is smallpox just like a skin thing, or there are other symptoms? Is it you get nausea?
I'm not positive on this. I mean, I know you have the skin thing, but I'm assuming if your whole body is covered in lesions and this whole thing, it's causing other problems internally. You probably get, I'm assuming, fevers, because your body's trying to fight it this entire time too. Yeah. So you probably have all your immune system things going off and then eventually shutting down if they can't handle it. So I'm assuming there's going to be other complications involved as well. But as you can see, it's a horrible disease to contract. So something that I would not want to contract personally.
That's
I know. So if we fast forward a couple centuries from there, we can get into the 20th century, or 1918 to be exact. If you want to move to the next slide, Alan. What happened, Trav, in 1918?
Spanish flu.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said it all British-like, but...
Well, it's kind of ironic, because where did Spanish flu originate from?
Europe.
I don't know, but it wasn't Spain. I know that much. But a lot of people pegged it as being, I don't remember why, but I did remember hearing a story a long time ago about how it was not originated in Spain, but it got pegged on the Spanish for some reason. But basically, the Spanish flu is the original H1N1. Where have you guys heard that before?
The swine flu?
Yep. So H1N1.
So H1N1 is coronavirus is technically a bunch of different types, viruses. COVID-19 is the specific one we're dealing with right now. So H1N1 is just the equivalent of coronavirus.
Yeah, but that's my understanding is it's a type of virus. But yeah, so now they've had the H1N1 outbreak that became the swine flu. I think there's H5N1 or something, wasn't that? I think that was bird flu. But some of them have different numbers and stuff, letters, and I don't know. It's something that I would like to learn more about, but I don't know at this very moment. But the Spanish flu lasted for, in a lot of ways, I think it can resemble what we're going to go through, or we are going through right now, in the fact that it took them 2 years to really get through the pandemic of the Spanish flu, because it did exactly what you said, Al. Once it would finally start looking like it was tapering off, it would come back and hit with another vengeance. So over the course of 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu killed 675,000 Americans and 50 million people worldwide, which at that point, I would imagine the population of the Earth couldn't have been more than like 2 or 3 billion.
I think so. I looked up in 1900, the population was about 1.6 billion.
Okay, so I'd imagine it's like 2 billion maybe in
Maybe
1920.
a little less. So
if you lose 50 million out of that 2 billion, that's like what, 2.5% of the population?
I don't know. You're the mathematician, dude.
Well, maybe somebody could be double checking my math while.
We'll just assume you're right. I can't imagine somebody's listening to us and being like, that's not 2.5%. And even if they do, who cares?
Well, I'm assuming it's 5% of 1 billion. So if of 2 billion, I'm just cutting it in half, 2.5%. But yeah, so of the entire population, like Alan said, if there was 1.6 to 2 billion people on Earth, 1/3 of the people on Earth actually contracted the Spanish flu at some point during that 2 years. So 1 out of every 3 people had to go through the Spanish flu, which
2.5%.
Sweet. Thank you. Your calculator is impressive.
It took me that long with a calculator. Because my calculator on my phone, it wouldn't let me go up to 2 billion. And then I was like, oh, and I figured out if I turn it sideways, it does. Yeah. Who'd have thought?
I do math in my head that is bigger than your phone can do vertically. That's what you're saying.
Yep.
But yeah, so that was the Spanish flu. Alan, I know you said you read a little bit about the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
You gonna share anything?
Like, yes, I did.
Good conversation.
Yeah. Would you like to share with us what you learned, Alan?
Well, so I was watching like this YouTube video of like this little slideshow that was just like to music, and it was wrong because it said 300 million people contracted the Spanish flu, and it said which was 1/3 of the world's population, and I was like, you're telling me in 1918 there were only 900 million people in the world? I don't think that's correct. So then I went and looked up the population, and that's where I got in 1900 it was 1.6 billion. So that was way off.
Yeah,
and,
their math is.
But other than that, wrong. I mean, did you get the number 300 million contracted it? Did you ever
No, I got like over 500 million. So that would be a lot closer to the 1.6 billion.
All right. I'm going to check my sources from now on.
It's YouTube.
Huh?
Nothing that goes on YouTube is real, right, guys?
Can't trust anything on YouTube. But yeah, did you have anything else that you saw or whatever that I haven't covered or we haven't covered at this point?
There was a statistic I read that more U.S. soldiers died from the Spanish flu in 1918 than died in World War I in 1918.
Yeah, because didn't World War I just end right around the time the Spanish flu?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that was kind of part of the story. It was like actually it was people came back from World War II or World War I. And that's where a lot of like the cases of the Spanish flu originated was from military members coming home, if I remember right.
In my head, the conditions in the trenches in World War I were like so horrific and horrendous that I wouldn't be surprised if somehow that was where the flu came from.
Yeah, they should probably make a movie about that. Like stuff that happened probably like around the year before 1918.
Mm-hmm. Well, they just made a movie called 1918.
No, it was 1917.
Oh, 1917. Oh, yeah.
Well done. Finally, the guy's way to get the joke. I'm like, well, to get the joke. So,
Those
all right.
Those Europeans.
Europeans. All right, so then the next one that I had, so we're not touching every single plague or pandemic that's ever hit the earth. There's a ton of them, but I'm doing some of the bigger ones and then some of the ones that stand out more because the next two are ones that have happened in our lifetimes. The next one is AIDS or HIV.
Oh, Magic Johnson. That's why you had me get a picture of him.
So tiny.
He's so little. Why is he so little? I should have got you a better quality picture.
I know. You
For
know,
anyone who can't
search
see what
Google-
that is, that's Magic Johnson posting up Michael Air Jordan back in, I would imagine, the late 80s, early 90s. But, I mean, anybody who's a sports fan, and probably anybody who's not a sports fan, knows that Magic Johnson was probably the one that kind of brought HIV to, like, the center of attention here in the U.S. as far as he contracted HIV
He was
and had
the
to
Rudy
retire from
Gobert of
basketball.
his day.
What?
He was the Rudy Gobert of his day. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Kind of. But, yeah, like, but the thing is, and maybe this is a good time to talk about it, because I vaguely remember when Magic Johnson had to come to the podium and tell everybody that he had HIV, and he was very clear to make sure that everyone understood that does not mean he has AIDS yet. It just means he has the HIV virus. And I don't even know do we know, like, did it ever come out, like, how he contracted it or how they think he contracted the HIV virus?
I think it was. Well, I think because the thing back then is just that everybody thought that, like, oh, if you have AIDS, then you're gay.
Yeah, but that's obviously not right.
Well, yeah, and so I think he came out and he was explaining, like, no, you can be straight and get AIDS or get HIV, I guess.
But the point is, like, it was always, like, known, at least at that point, I remember, I mean, everyone knew it as, like, the sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
So, like,
well, it's
in
a
the
sexually
end,
transmitted disease, but it's, I mean, what they obviously didn't know, like, when it first started was just that, I mean, there's various ways that you can get it, but it does have to enter into your bloodstream. So.
Yeah. I mean, later on, they figured out it could be transmitted through saliva, I believe. It can be transmitted through, like, obviously, like, sharing of needles. So there's, like, a lot of drug addicts who contracted it from using the same needles as other people.
You don't even have to be an addict. You can just be a recreational user.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I feel if you're a
Recreational
recreational user, you're not going to be taking somebody else's needle, because I don't care if you are a junkie. That's still gross.
But, I mean, yeah, this was a big thing, and it came on the scene, and he had to retire from the NBA because basically at the time, no one would want to play with him because they thought that if they played against him, they would contract AIDS or HIV, and, like, if he got a cut or got a bloody nose, then they could get it. And so, I mean, which I understand the fear back then.
Just let him drive to the hoop free and clear.
It's true. He could have been the most dominant scorer ever after that. But the thing is, like, you hear about it, but you really don't hear about it that much anymore. And so I was curious to find this out. 37.9 million people on Earth are alive with the HIV virus right now.
That's because it's manageable now. There's medications. There's treatment.
Yeah. And I guess I should say this was a study done in 2018, so a couple of years ago. So I'm assuming the numbers are similar now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and it wasn't so much that I thought, like, everybody would have died from it, because I know it's more treatable, more manageable. Obviously, Magic Johnson is still thriving to this day, and it's been like 30 years almost since he came out with it. Mm-hmm. But I think it was more shocking that just that many people actually have it still. Like, I kind of, for some reason, because I didn't hear about it as much, I just thought, oh, like, there's not very many people that have left that really have the disease, right? But apparently that's wrong. There's a lot of people that still do. So, I don't know. AIDS.
Well, if you want to, just a couple of recommendations, one movie, I know I've talked about this before, it was actually back in our episode of Who Would We Bring Back from Death episode about celebrities. And I talked about Brad Renfro, who started a movie called The Cure. And so that's all about that. It's about this boy who has the HIV virus, and I think it was transmitted to him through he was sick some other way, got somebody's blood, like a blood transfusion, and then contracted it that way. But anyway, it's just about these two kids who, even back like when this movie came out, or I guess where it's set, people were very still uneducated about it. And so like Brad Renfro's mom was all worried and said, you can't go play with that boy because, you're going to contract AIDS. And, but anyway, they go off on this journey to try and find the cure for it and stuff like that. But anyway, it's a good movie. There's a show that I do not like. It was called Angels in America. And that was about AIDS too, but I did not like that.
My knowledge of the AIDS media or AIDS cinema is not as extensive as yours. I don't know that I've seen any movie.
It's not AIDS specific. It's just
Trav's like,
just, I have
in my collection of AIDS cinema over here.
Yeah.
AIDS cinema.
What are your thoughts? Trav, what are your thoughts on Dallas Buyers Club?
I never saw that movie, so that's what I'm saying. Like,
It was pretty good.
There's that. There's what? Philadelphia with Tom Hanks.
Oh yeah. Who now has got the COVID-19?
Yeah. Oh, he had AIDS in a movie, and now he has COVID. Oh my goodness. There's that album from Salt and Peppa, their first album, that has a song about AIDS. So, I mean, it's all over the place, man.
Yeah. In the 90s, AIDS was definitely like pop culture. Pop culture is probably the wrong word for it, but like it was so prevalently talked about that it was just like another verb almost, and it was just
look at what's going on right now with Corona. I mean, it's literally like you can't run away from it. Like, I mean, yeah, we're hiding in our houses so that we don't get it, but you can't get away from it.
Yeah. I literally get like at least 20 notifications on my phone every day with updates on it. Every news station, they never talk about anything else. Like America is oblivious to any other thing that's going on in the world because it's all 24/7 COVID coverage.
I was gonna make a post on Facebook that said, and I don't know if this would be funny or not, but I was just gonna say, well, we haven't heard much about any terrorists lately, so that's good.
Yeah, we are just being terrorized by little teeny microscopic terrorists.
And maybe coronavirus will take out some of our enemies. Maybe some of those people in the Midwest that are wanting to hurt us.
In the Midwest?
Not in the Midwest.
Oh, I thought you purposely said that.
Those dang people from Oklahoma and Colorado and Alaska.
All those people.
Tornado Alley.
But let me just say.
I mean the Middle East.
Let me just say, we mean terrorists, not all people in the Middle East.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I said some of those people that want to hurt us is what I said.
Like those people in the Midwest. That's what he said.
Those people in the Midwest.
So ourselves in Utah. Wait, we're
I would consider us slightly like west of Midwest.
Oh,
I consider the Midwest to start like around Oklahoma. Texas is like more the south, but up above Oklahoma is Nebraska, the Dakotas. What other? Iowa. Kentucky.
Okay. All right.
Kentucky's more the south. All right. So that's enough about AIDS for now. The last one I want to go over is just Ebola.
What's so funny, Chap?
That's enough about AIDS.
For now.
We'll circle around on that one. We'll come back to that one later.
Well, we just spent a lot of time on AIDS. That's all. So let's get into Ebola.
We're laughing an awful lot for a show about pandemics and plague.
I gotta keep it light, guys, or else I'm gonna go insane.
That's our.
It's a very heavy topic. Our laughing is not at like the situations or the people obviously that are hurt by the pandemics. It's just we're trying to keep it light because we're also here to try and just help people have a better day, right?
Yeah.
You know, in the end. So, but Ebola.
There's plenty of time to be depressed after.
One of my favorite memories of Ebola, and that sounds weird to say my favorite memories of Ebola, but like is Trav Cole borrowing my copy of Outbreak in the 90s and watching it only to find out that my videotape ran out of space at like for the last 20 minutes of the movie.
You recorded it off of TV.
I
still have not.
The pandemic is still going on.
It's on Netflix now.
I know, but now it feels like a little weird to watch it right now.
Why?
So, I don't know.
If not now, when?
Because of Corona.
See, Trav, you're talking to Alan, who like his first inclination once we were like, oh, we're having a coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic was to go watch Contagion. So
yeah.
But he wasn't the only one. Contagion became like a top 3 movie watched on like on Apple.
Everybody started watching it. But the sick part about that is that I had already seen it when it first came out. So I watched it for the second time just because of this pandemic.
So what do they call that? Like when it comes back, reoccurrence?
Huh?
A bounce back?
Huh? The Lagoon deal? What are you talking about?
No, like when like a disease comes back again, like cycles back.
What's it called?
Yeah. I swear I've heard people talking about it all the time because they're like what you said, like if it comes back in the fall, it's going to be a blank.
A crappy time?
Whatever. Reoccurrence. Yeah.
Oh, reoccurrence, I guess. Those work.
But anyway, Ebola obviously was
a resurgence.
A resurgence, maybe. But yeah, had an average death rate of 50%. So 1 out of every 2 people, with a simple math, would have possibly died from Ebola. The one good thing about Ebola is it couldn't spread to another person until that person had symptoms. And so you could at least like, as soon as somebody like started showing symptoms, immediately isolate them, quarantine them, and then you could really curb the growth or rate of Ebola, of the Ebola virus. Apparently, it's a very hard word to say. I'll just say EVD for short, I think is what they called it. Ebola virus disease.
Oh.
EVD. But yeah, so if you got the Ebola virus, you would have fever, fatigue, headache, sore throat, and then that would be usually followed by vomiting, diarrhea, a rash, impaired kidney and liver function, and eventually internal and external bleeding.
You would what? What was that last?
You want me to read? Internal or external bleeding.
Oh, okay. Like from your eyes and ears?
I think people would bleed from like and they could bleed from like their gums. They could bleed internally, and that's, I mean, obviously, like if you bleed internally, that's not good. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, me too.
I don't like bleeding at all, so.
Would you rather bleed internally or externally?
Well, externally,
Yeah.
but still.
Because then I can put pressure on it and maybe a Band-Aid.
But if you bleed internally, you won't see any blood. So if you're like squeamish of blood.
Oh yeah, it just fills up your cavities and you just die.
Yeah.
So
Really?
I don't know. I ain't no doctor.
What if you had your cavities filled?
Shut up, Danny. Move on.
So anyway, obviously Ebola was something that, like, I know there was an outbreak in the 90s, if I remember right. It might have even started earlier than that. But then again, we had the big outbreak in 2014 to 2016 in Africa. But here's the thing. The point of all of this, if you go through whether it's the prehistoric or epidemic that we weren't alive for, obviously, or Black Death, or smallpox, or Spanish flu, or AIDS, or Ebola, it doesn't really matter. The thing is, like, it always seemed like it was so far away from where we are in Salt Lake City, Utah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it happened, Ebola, like that. Oh, that's something that's happening. It's catastrophic. It's terrible, but it's happening over in Africa. SARS or whatever, that's happening over in Asia. MERS, that's happening over in the Middle East. Like AIDS, that's happening over in Africa primarily until Magic Johnson got it. But it wasn't like I was worried because I thought it was a sexually transmitted disease. And let's be honest, at 10 years old, I wasn't going to get any, you know? So I wasn't that worried about it. So I don't know, like, what do you guys feel like? To me, that's like one of the big differences between what we're going through now and what of the pandemics that we've gone through in the past.
Well, yeah, we talked about it last episode. I mean, even when this first started out, it was like, oh, this is coronavirus. It's in China. And you know what? It doesn't really matter because most people in China walk around with masks on anyway. So don't mean that as like necessarily a joke, but I mean, I swear they would just always wear masks as they go out because it's like, okay, I don't want to get sick for whatever reason.
And also, I think a big part of the masks too was like in like Shanghai, Shanghai, like the air pollution was so horrible.
Yeah.
That they were trying to filter out some of that crap in the air.
Yeah. But in the beginning, it was just, okay, yeah, it's over in China. And then it was over in Europe. And, you know, it slowly came. I don't know why we were the last ones. Well, I mean, I know there's other places that really aren't affected, but you know, we're America. We do everything bigger, better, whatever. I think I mentioned that last time. And so we just had to become the center of attention with it. And, and yes, this is why it's different, because now it is something that, you know, we now have to wear masks. I went to freaking Costco yesterday or the day before, and you know, I don't know, have either of you been to Costco recently?
No.
Yeah, I went there on the weekend, and I was telling people that it's interesting because now when you have to go into Costco, they have one entrance point that you can go through. They have to funnel everyone through, and then they put a bunch of like shopping carts and pallets up to basically separate everybody. But
Yeah.
the feeling that I get more than anything is like I'm in line for a haunted house or something like that. Like I'm getting ready to go to a haunted house.
But see, I got a different, well, I mean, I get what you're saying, but to me, it was just a very depressing moment because, you know, majority of the people that were standing in line, it was kind of a mix of like, I don't know, today, you know, you had people standing in line. Some people didn't have masks on, but you had people on cell phones and doing everything like that, but nobody was really talking to each other. You know, most people had masks on. Everybody was standing away from each other. It was super quiet. And it was like I was getting ready for, I don't know, like I was, and this is going to sound super morbid, and I don't mean it to be anywhere near this, but it was kind of like you were going into like a concentration camp. Not that I had Nazis, like, you know, killing people around and everything, but everybody was just so kind of depressed. And for those of us that were going for the first time, we weren't really knowing what to expect. And again, for everybody, just so we don't get a bunch of backlash on this, I am not saying that going shopping at Costco is like a concentration camp. I'm just saying that just the somber feelings was just like confusion and just quietness, and everybody was just standing in a line. It was like we were a herd of cattle waiting for the slaughter, and then they'd open up this little rope, and then you'd get to go in and do your thing, but still in there, everybody's like, I remember like kind of walking, and I'm keeping my distance too, but like people would like shun you if you were like within a few feet, because they're like, you know, I don't want to, I'm assuming you have it. Everybody's assuming everybody has it.
Well, I walked past this lady in Costco because she was walking really slow, and like her husband was kind of behind her. So like I had to kind of like weave between her husband and her to get by, because they just weren't really moving through this aisle. And I have no idea if this was geared even towards me or if it was completely unrelated or whatever. But like when I was passing her, all I heard was, oh, and like, so I was like, is that me? Like, is she saying that to me?
I'm like, you are Asian, so.
Oh, it probably was. Yeah. Now that I think about it. Just kidding. But no, like I said, I have no idea. Maybe she thought it was her husband coming up behind her, and then she realized I wasn't, or something. Like, it could have been completely unrelated, but it made me think. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of the comment, but because of the situation and the environment that we're in, it made me think like, oh, is she saying that because I got maybe quote unquote too close to her, like within her bubble, because I would have been less than 6 feet away for a split second while I was passing her. So I don't know. It is weird, and I totally get what you're saying, Trav. Like the whole, it is kind of like somber, this weird feeling that nobody really wants to. Like there used to be like a lot more talking and acknowledging others, and it feels like that's kind of going away.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just it's reality. Like in situations like this, you're going to see the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. So, you know, like for example, in New York City, I think it's on a nightly basis, but like I've seen some videos of you know, people on their balconies of their apartments or whatever, and the whole city, like everyone is just like at their window or whatever, just screaming and applauding for the healthcare workers, showing their gratitude for you know, the nurses and the doctors and everybody that's putting themselves in harm's way to try and battle this virus. But at the same time, today I read an article about, do you guys know Instacart?
Yeah, it's kind of,
yeah,
it's a grocery delivery service.
Yeah, you make an order, and then somebody that works for Instacart will go pick up your groceries that you know, your list of groceries, and then deliver it to your house. But now there are people that are like just like doing the most selfish thing they possibly could, which is, and you know, these workers, when they're going to pick up the groceries, they're putting themselves in harm's way. You know, to a certain extent, they're exposing themselves to maybe contracting the virus because it's a public space. But there are so many people that are ordering deliveries that they can't get to them all, or there's like a long wait. So people will put big tips on the orders, like $50 to $100, because the workers get to choose which orders they go get. And so they'll obviously choose these huge tips, you know, and go get those orders first. And then when they drop them off, as soon as they leave, there's an option for up to 3 days that you can go back and adjust your tip, and people will turn their tip back to zero, and they don't get any of that tip. The workers won't get any tip. So they're being conned into going to get these orders.
That's pretty messed up.
They're like, oh, I'm going to get $100. Nice. And then the tip just disappears.
They should have to go through like a whole dispute like center, like have to fill out forms and like go through and talk to somebody and be like, explain why. And they only get like one tip refund per like year or something like that. That way they can't just.
That would be cool if they changed it, or at least just like if Instacart recognized that was going on right now and said, "I'm sorry, but you cannot change
Alter your tip."
Yeah, you can't alter your tip like while this is going on, unless, like you said, it really was like you accidentally put an extra zero on there, and you're like, I didn't $500, and then you could call them or something and go through a process. But
yeah. True.
So,
Well, go ahead, Trav.
I was just gonna say, so we should probably move along just a little bit. I'll be honest, my phone just told me I've got about 10% left. I plugged it in, but I don't know if it's gonna work because I can't see if it's charging or not. But anyway, the two things that we really haven't covered yet is just kind of how COVID-19 stacks up against the pandemics of the past, and then what is the difference or what is different or better this time around. So
yeah. So I mean, to answer the first question, I think part of it that we just answered is the fact that things are so different for us here, especially in the States, because we've never had to deal with something like this in our lifetimes, as far as having to shelter in place, having to actually be fearful that we could contract it, having to be fearful that our friends or family could contract it, having you just kind of not knowing what to expect, having the actual effect on our economy, like all that kind of stuff that we've never had to experience before is obviously different this time around than it used to be when we were, or when other pandemics were happening in our lifetimes, and obviously the other ones we weren't even alive for. So it's just something that you learned about in the history books, right? So you always think way back then, obviously, like in the bubonic plague, yeah, it's just like Trav said, is it just because they didn't know how to clean out their poop and like they would just dump it on the streets, and this is eventually how, between that and the rats that were everywhere, that's what caused it? Or there's like, that's kind of the feeling that you get when you look back on some of these other ones. But I think that there's a lot of positives as far as like the place that we are now in the world versus where we were in the past, that stems well or looks good for us to be able to have a better outcome, to better treat this type of thing, to have, we're still going to have deaths, we're still going to have a lot of negative that comes out of it, but there could be less than obviously there was 100 years ago.
Yeah, and I figured because we talked about this a couple days ago, and I figured I'd just mention it because I actually did see something that confirmed it, but there was an article out there that was just talking about how we in the U.S. are counting the deaths of people with coronavirus. And the first thing that came out in this article or this message was that one of the leading causes of death in the United States, or probably in the world, but is heart disease, which takes 1,002 people every day. And so when you look at those numbers, I mean, there's probably a lot of people, not all of them, but there's probably a lot of them that could be dying that have the coronavirus, or that had contracted the coronavirus, but just died due to heart disease, not because of virus. Or maybe it was just like, yeah, the virus was in them. Maybe, they already had a weakened immune system, but it was still the heart disease that got them. But even if it was that, they've come out and said that it doesn't matter what the actual reason for death is. If they do either an autopsy or the postmortem check or whatever, and they find out that they have coronavirus, then they are added to the death toll. So, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things. It's like, we still don't have all the information, and the information that we are getting, that we see, is just kind of floods your mind, makes you nervous, makes you fearful, and it it could be just as bad as it's, everybody's saying, or it could maybe not be as bad. It's just that shouldn't take away from how we're reacting to it. But I think there was another thing that I told you about, Dan, was that, the thing that is worse than the coronavirus is the actual fear. And that's in a medical way or point of view, when you are scared, your body goes into fight or flight, and it uses excess energy, which actually takes away from your immune system. And so if you are scared and you're acting on that, your body's immune system is weakened anyway. So if you do contract it, the fear is actually probably worse than actually getting it. Because otherwise, if you weren't scared, you could be a little scared, but if you weren't, in this state of constant fear, then your immune system could probably, attack it and help out. But anyway, so I think just like the message at this point is everybody keep doing what they're doing. Obviously, the social distancing is working, may not be working to what we would like, because I know all of us want to get back to our freaking lives.
And on that note, I think understanding that we probably will not be going back to normal lives for a while, meaning until we have a vaccine or something. So it could be a year or two of, we kind of get back to the businesses kind of reopen, but I would not be surprised to see that it's just this ongoing, like, you really can't eat in. We're just going to be doing takeout for a while. You still got to be practicing certain social distancing measures, because we don't want a relapse or another, we don't want this to keep popping up all the time, because you very easily could until we basically eradicate it, So it's one of those things that's going to be interesting to see how we bounce back. And I think we've learned a lot over the last month. Everyone has, of just kind of how to deal with this new reality that we live in.
Yeah. So, well, just if you're listening to this, just keep up with the high spirits. Don't be fearful. Just keep doing what you're doing. Stay away from people. Wash your hands. All that stuff, and we should be able to get through this. But
and I know basically we went through some positives, but we also went through a lot of negatives. I know the point that we wanted to kind of do is maybe end on a little bit more of a positive note. So I just came up with some categories we can kind of go through really quick as far as what I think is better now than it was in the past with other pandemics, and see kind of where we are, how we can handle things better than we used to. So one area that I think we're better at now is kind of just in science and biology and medicine in general. I think it's something that we just know more. So the fact that we know more, we know better how to handle certain things and how to react to certain things. So if you want to bring up slide 7, Alan.
Yeah, like in 1918, I don't think we even knew what viruses were, or bacteria, maybe bacteria, but as far as viruses, I don't think we knew what they were, that they even existed.
So now
we obviously didn't have any ventilators. We didn't have any vaccines. Wait, did we? Smallpox, I think, was the very first vaccine ever.
Yeah, they might have been in the early, because I think they did come up with a vaccine eventually for the Spanish flu. That's when they came up with it. But this is, and I saw this kind of chart or graph or whatever you want to call it. I thought it was kind of interesting, but it just shows you our understanding of the difference between how the mortality rate or the death rate of a certain disease versus how contagious that particular disease is can make a difference on how much you have to worry about it affecting society. So around this whole chart here, you can see like some diseases are extremely deadly if you get them, but they are definitely something that affects the person or persons who gets it much more than it would affect like an entire group or society of people, right? Whereas if you had something that was much more contagious and got passed along a lot easier, like I think it's really small in here, but I think it's measles is clear over there on the right-hand side. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah.
But that one is super contagious and obviously can affect a lot more people, but it's not that deadly. So it's going to affect a lot of people. So basically,
I think measles was for every one person that has it, they can give it to 16 other people.
yeah. So you can
On
see
average.
something like that, how that one can be scary as far as just getting a bunch of people sick. But kind of like the worst for society in general is getting a disease that's fairly contagious, and especially if it's contagious without having to show symptoms like COVID-19 is, where you can be asymptomatic or just be in the early stages, not showing any symptoms, but still giving it to other people where other people can contract it from you, but also has a decent mortality rate, meaning, it's right at this point, I think they're still figuring out what it is, but by most estimates, it looks like they're looking somewhere between 3 to 6%, by a lot of the estimates that I've seen recently. So it's got a fairly high mortality rate, but it's also fairly contagious. The thing, though, is that if something's super deadly, it kind of almost in a way takes care of itself. So the worst case, because the virus does not want you to die as the host, because if you as the host dies, it kills the chances of the virus spreading more, right? Like the virus wants to keep the host alive so that it can spread easily and continue to go into other hosts, and it keeps itself alive. Because as we all know at this point, viruses aren't, I don't know, how would you classify them? Because they're not necessarily like living beings, right? They're just kind of like, they can't reproduce on their own. They have to have a host to reproduce. And so,
but they still have RNA, right? They don't have DNA. They have RNA.
yeah, I think they can have either or. Most of them, I think, do have an RNA, but that's what goes into the cell itself, and that's what infects the host and causes the host to actually help the virus duplicate and create more of the virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like you guys were talking, like Trav was saying earlier, like if we know this now, but back in the Black Plague times or the early smallpox epidemics, you wouldn't have necessarily known what was going on or why it was going on. This would be the times when you would have people just blaming the devil or assuming that this is witchcraft or magic or that somebody's after them, and it's like this hocus pocus stuff, right? Like it's just not, they don't know why it's happening to them. Maybe they did something wrong, or so they're just trying to figure that out. But on top of all that, like for this whole thing, they did, I mean, you think of something like genome sequencing, and it almost doesn't even sound that impressive anymore. But if you think about the ability to genome sequence something, and the fact that they were able to genome sequence the COVID-19 virus within just like a matter of weeks, and then get that information to all the scientists all over the world so they could immediately start working on vaccines and cures and different things to help deal with the virus. To me, that's something that's very positive and very different than epidemics or pandemics or any virus of the past. So if you bring up slide 8, Al. There's one thing they found on here. And Trav, I'm going to show you.
Okay.
So that you can see it. But can you read what the third word down the list on the right is? Like if you were to read the third line, I guess. Yep. So they found out that the COVID-19 virus has what's called an envelope.
Who is it sending letters to?
They're emotional letters.
Emotional letters. Stupid.
See, I preordained this months ago. But no, even looking at this and reading a little bit about it, I still can't really meticulously describe the envelope to you. To me, it's pointing towards like the exterior looking wall of the virus, I guess. But this is something that all viruses don't necessarily have. It's good for this particular virus because it helps, the envelope itself helps it disguise and avoid your immune system. So it kind of is like almost like a stealth or incognito mode or something like that the virus has to avoid your immune system kicking in as quickly. But the downside for the virus itself is the envelope makes it super susceptible to cleaning agents or anything like that. So I mean, that's why you can easily kill this with, what do they call it? 401, 409.
Yeah, 409.
401.
And like hand sanitizers and stuff like that. So yeah, but there's a lot of things that have been positive that are better now just because of our understanding of what's going on, their ability to dig deep into the science, understand the virus itself, understand how it works, what it's trying to do, what it's going after. We know it's going after the ACE2 receptors. That's how it's trying to connect, So what can we do to curb that or avoid that, or where they can look for things? And then we talked a little bit about this, so we're not going to talk long about it, but last episode, wasn't it chloroquine that we talked about, Trav? And there were people that drank, like there's a couple that drank aquarium cleaner, and one of them ended up dying because there is hydroxychloroquine in aquarium cleaner, like a small amount of it or something like that.
I don't know. Maybe we talked about it. I don't necessarily remember that part, but.
But yeah, there's
I have heard about people that like, I don't know if this is true, but people taking the advice to drink bleach because that would kill the virus or something.
Probably would, but it would also kill them.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's like hard for me to understand, the thought process that some people go through. Because yeah, bleach would probably kill the virus. I would agree, but it's not good for your own intestines, if you know what I'm saying. But there's 3 different medicines that they've already come up with that they've identified that have show promise. Like none of this means that they are going to work or whatever. But there's remdesivir. This is a medicine that they came up with to actually fight Ebola and is effective against Ebola. They found that this was also effective against SARS and MERS in the past. But they find that it interferes with the virus's ability to replicate. So basically, it just slows the virus itself down once it's in the system. We talked about the hydroxychloroquine or the chloroquine. That's a drug that actually was used to cure or treat malaria. This is supposed to actually raise the pH level in your cells and making them less inhabitable for these particular viruses. It was also effective against SARS. And then there's lopinavir. Do you know what I'm talking about, Trav?
No.
Lopinavir and ritonavir.
What?
These are apparently. What?
Why do you assume, or why do you ask if like that's correct? Like to me, it's like, is that right?
Well, because
You're a pharmacist, right?
Your English skills are superior to mine, so I figured.
Yeah, but I don't have it up in front of me, so I don't know what it is. That's a new word to me.
Lopinavir, and ritonavir is what apparently that's how I sound them out. But anyway, they were used to treat HIV because they can actually reduce the number of virus in your system. So that's why people with HIV, if they take these drugs together, it actually helps suppress the number of HIV virus in their system. Therefore, hopefully, so that it doesn't eventually turn into the full-fledged AIDS, I think is how it works, right? But they also found that these drugs were effective against SARS. So there is track records for them being effective against other versions of coronavirus. And they've shown a little bit of promise, but it's still something that's in the works. I'm only sharing this information because maybe somebody out there would like to know what they're working on and what's going on. But that was basically what I had for science/medicine and our understanding of biology, unless you guys have anything to add to that.
Nope, that's it.
All right. So the other thing, Trav might have more excitement about this one, is advancement in technologies.
Okay.
So like Trav or Alan was saying, well,
Are we gonna wait? Are we talking about this slide? No.
we can. I was about to get to that, but yeah, and like you said, like we have respirators now, right? Is that ventilators?
Ventilator, yeah. Yep.
That can, I mean, obviously they found that that's helped like a lot of people. If we didn't have ventilators, I think the death rate of COVID-19 would be much higher than it is. But the fact that we have this technology available and we know how to use it helps a lot of people survive that may otherwise have not survived. We've talked about vaccines briefly last week. Trav went on his rant. I don't know if you want to go on another rant about non-vaccinators, Trav.
Vaccinate your damn kids.
But last week we talked about the RNA vaccine that they got going on in clinical trials. And so I thought, for me, I don't really understand what the heck clinical trials meant necessarily. Like, I knew it was like they were testing it and they were working on it. But whenever somebody told me, if I would have just come up to you, Trav, and said they're in phase 2 clinical trials, would you know what that even means? Without looking at the chart on the screen.
Yeah, I would have no clue. I'm like, phase 2 of how many phases?
Yeah, like me too. I didn't know how many phases there were either. So just doing a quick research on it. So there's basically like 4 phases, but you can actually even start at phase 0. Phase 0, if you do start at that, is basically, is it going in, is what the phase is. So meaning, is your body even absorbing the medication or the medicine, whatever it is, the drug, into your system? Because I guess some drugs, sometimes they'll go in, but they just come back out and they don't really do anything. So you got to first make sure that it actually can be absorbed in whatever form you're taking it into the body that makes it effective. Once they determine that, then they go to phase 1, which is it poison, basically, which basically is like, is there adverse effects? So they take a small group of people, maybe like 30 to 100 people, maybe even less than that in this phase, and they just have them take it and make sure, you're not dying, you're not having really bad side effects, it's not poisonous to your body or your system or whatever it is. So in doing that, that's phase 1. Phase 2 doesn't work. So once you're in phase 2, it's actually going in to see if it actually treats the disease or whatever it's doing, because it does no good if you get to this point and the drug itself doesn't actually cure or treat whatever you're creating it to do, right? So it has to get through phase 2 trials. If it proves that, then phase 3 is basically, does it do it better than whatever else is on the market already? Because there's no point in creating a drug that's not as good as another drug that's already out there. So it has to be better in the fact that it actually treats it better, or that it's just as good, but it has less side effects, or it's safer. So there's got to be like a reason that makes sense for it to move forward through phase 3 trials. And then phase 4 is basically, it's already passed all those phases, it's out there, it's available to the public or whoever has access to it, but they do ongoing testing and making sure that, like, now that the masses have it, that there still isn't any issues or side effects that they were unaware of, or that it's still working. So that's kind of the phase of clinical trials for anybody who didn't know. And then finally, one other really cool thing that I saw was artificial intelligence. So they now have the ability to have artificial intelligence be able to go through, crunch all the numbers or all the different drugs that are known out there, and they can just basically just compare and contrast and be like, okay, we know that this drug helps take care of this kind of thing, we know that this drug helps take care of this thing, and the computer itself is just continually learning and figuring out what drug combinations it can use to potentially create a new drug that will be effective against a new virus or something like that. So I don't know, AI is a very interesting topic anyway, but this is just one more use for it that is pretty interesting, in the fact that you can have something basically working at light speed 24/7, trying to figure out these very complex problems, just combining all these different variables and factors together into trying to figure out an answer or something that would be effective against, in this case, a virus, right? So those are all things to me that make me feel better that we're in a better spot today than we were 100 years ago, or even 10 years ago, or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other technologies or whatever, Trav?
No.
Hospital beds have really improved.
They go up and down. So
And
Push a button on it, and the
I
nurse
hear
comes.
they have lumbar support.
you got great lumbar. So So, I mean, let's say you get better with the virus, but then all of a sudden you got scoliosis. So,
Yeah, that's true, because you were laid up for so long that you need back support now.
yeah.
Plus, I heard people get back pains with it anyway, but that's because they have sore muscles, I think.
They have those leg massagers so you don't get blood clots. Sitting
So,
there, laying there
tons
for
of
so long.
tons of technology.
Yeah. So this last thing on that is like right up Trav's alley, because I know how much Trav likes poo humor, and so. And so
What does that mean? Like, why? Why?
I don't know. I just thought I'd throw it in for you. But no, they like a recent thing that they kind of found out is that they can go test sewage in certain areas for remnants of the COVID-19 virus. And so what they've found is actually this can be a precursor to when an outbreak is going to occur in a certain area. So they can find certain spots that are like, I'm going to go test the sewage coming out of this area. And if they can find traces of COVID, they know that there's a high likelihood that that area is going to experience an outbreak shortly. So they can maybe use that as like a warning factor. It'd be like the siren that goes off when a tornado is about to start in like the Midwest that Trav hates. And
The what?
the Midwest. Remember, you're scared of people in the Midwest?
You call it Trav AIDS?
No, that Trav hates.
That Trav hates.
Oh, yeah.
Trav hates.
They talk about the Trav AIDS. I was like, I don't have AIDS.
But no, like that's what that Trav hates. But yeah, like they could actually warn people ahead of time and say, all right, everybody in this city, you need to go quarantine or go do self-isolation or do social distancing, because we're fairly certain that the poo is telling us that there's going to be an outbreak soon.
What were you expecting? How were you expecting me to react to that? Like, you tell me like, oh, we can find coronavirus. It's like a precursor to outbreaks is in the poo. And I'd be, oh. Poo? Really?
Exactly.
I love poo topics.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I expected. I would have expected you to be like, wait, what? Did you say poo? Are you talking about poo?
The poo
Yeah.
shall save us all.
I'm just saying, poo is the future of humanity. But yeah, other good things though that we've had now this time that we have not had in the past, at least that I know of, is corporations and to a certain extent the government has actually been stepping up at a rate that I don't think they have in the past. Partially probably because like this is more hitting close to home, obviously, or is hitting home. But I mean, I don't know. What have you guys heard? Like, what
You talking about state governments
as
or
far as like? I mean, both to a certain degree. I think some states have been better to react than the federal government as far as the decisions that they made. But in general, from like the government standpoint, the Fed immediately moved their rates down to 0%, which is something they wouldn't have done back in 2008. That's something they didn't do back in 2008, which created the 2008 recession was a lot worse because they were slow to react. The federal government passed the $2 trillion stimulus. They're sending money out to everybody that makes under a certain amount of money so that they have extra cash. They're extending unemployment benefits. They're helping small businesses keep customers on payroll. What's that?
Said as long as you paid your taxes.
Yeah. See, it pays sometimes to pay your taxes. Although I paid a lot more in taxes still.
Than the $3,400 that you're gonna get.
Yep. How about you, Trav? Have you paid more taxes than that?
Yes. In one sitting, yes.
I'm gonna sit here and just ask Trav every question that I come up with to see if he's experienced it, how he feels about it. How do you feel about poo in Texas? How do you feel about
they're one and the same thing.
But on top of that, like companies themselves have stepped up and kept employees on, or are donating large sums of money, or going out of their way to produce essential goods that aren't even like their core business. Like the car companies are now creating making ventilators. You have other companies that are making masks that don't normally make masks, or
hand sanitizers.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things. I don't know if I'm sure your company's offered some maybe extended benefits and stuff like that to you. I know you get to work from home some days. I don't know if that's necessarily a benefit or not, but at least it's an option that you get.
Well, it's better than your company who thinks that the only dangerous day is Friday. So,
well, for me.
Which means tomorrow you get to work from home, dude.
Yeah, because tomorrow is very high likelihood that I'm going to contract the virus if I was not at home. But that's what they say. Friday, Asian contraction day, is what the saying is.
You go out on a Friday, you'll contract an Asian. Those suckers will just be latched onto your ass.
Pretty sure I met my wife on a Friday. All right, so
we start wrapping this up.
Yes, please.
So, like, the last possible thing is, well, not the last possible thing, but the last.
He can't help himself.
I know.
He wrote it down, so he has to say it.
No, I'm skipping stuff, just so you know. Like, but what I'm not going to skip is Trav's absolute favorite, and that is entertainment and connection options that we have. So because we got to be in quarantine, isn't life so much better that we're in quarantine in 2020 than if it was 1920 or 1820?
I know. Instead of making shadow puppets on the wall, we can... I mean, I was telling my wife, I'm like, I'm much better at being in quarantine than you are, just because she wants to get out. And, like, I want to get out of the house, too. I want to do other things, but I could seriously keep myself busy forever. So,
yeah. I mean,
I'm fine.
Have you finished Netflix yet?
I'm getting close, but I have Hulu, I have Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus. So
there's still so many more streaming services to go. And yeah, no, like I started Tiger
Not to mention
King.
all the movies that I have, and I have hundreds. So,
but yeah, I mean, but it's not just. I mean, there's all the like content you can stream and watch, but it's not just that. There's books that come in digital format, so it's not even like you have to go out and get a physical book anymore. You could literally buy a book and download it at any time if you wanted to. This is something I know Trav does a lot more than I do, but gaming I think is going to be something that's going to grow exponentially out of this whole thing, because it's something people can do. And not only that, it's not just gaming, but it's gaming online with your friends and being able to play. I mean, one game that we actually have been playing in our family is Risk on our phones. Like, there's the board game Risk that you can get on your phone, and you can play with each other across the internet. So
I want to play.
Yeah, so we'll invite you to a game of Risk, Trav. So, but that's been fun, because it does everything for you too. You don't even have to physically go move the pieces around and like do all that stuff. So,
well, I'd imagine. I'd hope so.
But yeah, so and then finally, just like video chat is something else that I know is just what we're doing right now. We would not have been able to do this even like 10 years ago in the way that we're doing it now. So I've seen Alan and Trav in some ways maybe as much as I normally had in the past, because we can still stay connected via video chat, right? So
and this way we get sick backgrounds.
Yeah. I mean, I can show you where all the places in the world that are contracting the virus are. Just FYI, so that you guys aren't confused if you're watching this on YouTube, this is an older map. It's like 3 or 4 weeks old, I think. So don't take this map as gospel. You see how you do that? You say the saying right. Gospel.
Good job.
Yeah, what'd you say last?
All right. I'm officially ending this. So thank you everybody for listening. Promise next time we come back with another episode, I feel like we've been talking for 3 hours. I don't know. But because we normally have a timer. I don't have a timer now. I just feel like it's been forever. But we'll come back with something not coronavirus related. We'll try not to even mention it because I think we need other topics in our life apart from what's going on. Let's keep our minds off of it. Let's keep that fear factor away so that our immune systems can do what they're supposed to do. But thank you for listening, everybody, or watching, if you were watching this on YouTube. But you can catch us regularly, our podcast release on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Our website, qcopodcast.com, and then you can also follow us on our various social media platforms. Not LinkedIn. Catch us on LinkedIn.
You name like the one platform we're not on.
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, although we don't know how to use Twitter. But that's all at QCO Podcast as well. So if you like what you hear, don't solely rate us on today's episode. But go and give us a 5-star rating or whatever you feel we deserve. I think at this point we don't even care as long as we know people are listening. But I think that's pretty much it. You guys have anything else you want to say before we turn things off?
No, just reiterating what you said. I think we should go to a lighter topic. How about like toys, Trav? Should we talk about toys?
I have an idea about toys. I like where you're going with that. So maybe next time we'll talk about some toys.
And don't forget, we are going to start the Dream-isodes again. So join us for those because that is pure entertainment. There is
we
no
won't talk about coronavirus
sadness
unless Danny dreams about it. And even at that point, it's probably going to be 6-7 months down the road before we even get to that dream. So
that's true.
Anyway, all right. Thanks everybody for listening, and catch us next week.